we're back again. So what are we doing today? Well, we're making more soap. But this time, we've outstripped the supply of bacon fat. So, I'm going to make some out of beef fat that the butcher gave me, which means I've got to render it. So, I found a really cheap saucepan that's come out of my camping kit. I'm going to use that to render the fat. Hopefully I don't stink out the kitchen and get thrown out of the house because it's raining today. Let's get this cut up. Alright, well, I am kind of tired today, so I apologise if my voice is a little bit dreary or tired, or can't even think of the word here. Unscripted videos are a pain in the ass. Anyway, so I've got all these bits of fat here. This is going to turn into what you would call tallow. And I've got quite a bit of work ahead of me here to cut all these up into nice little pieces. And the idea here is to heat these until the fat is liquefied and all the moisture is removed from it. So I've got quite a bit to do here, so I'm going to cut this up and we'll cut to when I'm done. Now it's at this point where you realise how sharp a butcher's knives really are and how blunt your kitchen knife is. So best thing I've got is a field sharpener, but this has been a bit overdue. We'll get there, we'll give it a few more repetitions and we'll be there. Alright, let's try now. Oh, much better. Right. Gonna make short work of this. Alright guys, we've got a full pot full done. And we've got a bit left over. I'll cut that up while this stuff's melting down. Now a quick tip, open all the windows and turn the exhaust fan on before you do this. It stinks. I'm using the low heat because I don't want to cook it, I just want to render it. So we'll let this get heating and we'll see what happens when things start to melt. While that's happening, I'm going to cut the rest of the spare stuff up. Now the irony of all this is I'm using one of the blocks of soap from the last batch I made to wash my hands up after the first batch. Now, in case everybody doesn't already know this, there's a correct way to wash your hands. You get some soap on here, you rub them together, then you get between your fingers, then you get tips of your fingers, then you do your thumbs, then you do the backs. Then the bit everybody forgets, you do it around the wrist. And then rinse thoroughly in lukewarm water. For at least 20 seconds. Right, now I've done my civic duty and showed you how to wash your hands and given you a subliminal message that hopefully sinks in. Keep doing that, guys. Let's go back over and see what this fat's doing. At this point I would usually use a wooden spoon, but I don't want to contaminate our good wooden spoons. They tend to soak up smells and flavours. Plastic spoons on the other hand, not so much. We've got a good layer of melting fat happening down the bottom there, so we'll just keep this going. It doesn't smell too bad, it just smells like a good roast beef at the moment. And what we get out of this is what we're going to call tallow. But we'll keep this going till all the fat's melted out and till they look dry and crispy. This is actually how bacon crackling is made. You do this with bacon fat, and that's called lard. Beef fat is called tallow. So we're just going to cook these till all the moisture and the fat's melted out of them, and they look a little crispy and crackly and hopefully are floating in a pile of oil. Once these shrink down a bit, I'll be adding in the rest that we've just cut up. Alright, so we're about halfway there. We've still got bubbles, which means we've still got water in there, or moisture. And but it is starting to reduce down a bit, and they're starting to get dry little crackling bits. So basically once this starts bubbling, or stops bubbling rather, that's when we'll be starting the next batch. Alright, so our bubbling's nearly stopped. We've just about got all the moisture out of this. You'll have to deal with the background music. We're on lockdown and the apprentice is on the N64. But fairly soon we're going to scoop these out, and I'm going to put some of the other stuff in here and try and sort of just use that extra oil in there to help improve the heat conduction into the fresh stuff. And then I'll find a way to get this out of the pot without burning myself and making a massive mess. Pretty much all our bubbling stopped, bar this one little bit in the corner, but we're not too worried about that. So I'm going to scoop these out and do a transfer. In the meantime, my financial manager has shut her office door, which means I may be getting kicked out at some point. Anyway, let's scoop these out and put them in a safe place. Magpies are going to love these. I'm going to scoop these into the air fryer basket because it's got a basket and a catch underneath. I can get a little bit more fat out of that. Alright, from here we start adding the new stuff, and I'm going to do that with a scoop so I don't burn myself. And remember to add these progressively so you don't end up with an oil fire, because I'm using a gas flame here, so I don't want this to boil over. So I'm going to leave these sit for a little bit and bubble before I add the next lot, just till they calm down a bit. There's aerated hot oil flowing down the side of a pan on a gas flame. It can be pretty dangerous. We do, in the worst case, have a fire extinguisher and a fire blanket on hand. It's just off camera. So, yeah. I'll just add them progressively. Because once you've added them, there's not much going back as well, so you just need to be careful. A little bit at a time. Keep going. Alright, now they can simmer for a bit, and I'm going to wash up. Alright, so once again our bubbling's nearly stopped, and we've got nice little crackling bits here. At this point I'm going to turn the heat off, and I'm going to scoop these out. And then we'll let this cool until such a time as it won't melt my measuring cups. Where are we? Scoop all these out. Looks like I've got around about a litre of oil or fat out of this, or tallow would be the correct word. And also, if I leave it sit for a bit, most of the heavier stuff should precipitate to the bottom, and the other stuff that's floating on the top I can skim off, and I should have reasonable clarity. So let's let this cool off. What we have left over here is a whole bunch of what would be pork crackling if this was pork, but this is beef crackling. This doesn't smell particularly appealing to my nose, but to some it would. But anyway, that's another byproduct we can use for something, but I think it might get thrown out at this point. Anyway, let's let this cool off, all the while leaving the window and the exhaust fan on. Alright, so the next thing that I do here is I've got to work out how much fat I've got, because all my other measurements depend on that. So I'm going to do, and this is a bit funky, I'm going to work out my water as a ratio of the fat rather than a ratio of the soda. But we're using caustic soda, by the way, that's why I'm calling it soda. So we need to measure our fat first and then derive all our other measurements from that. Hopefully it's cool enough now that it won't melt my bucket. Now I'm using the slow cooker again, but this time it's on low, not high mode. That might be a crucial difference. Let's put our pot in here. See how we go. So 850 ml is what we have. Alright, let's just tip this off carefully so we don't get all the crap in there as well. In fact, I'll try and do this. I want to get as much of this out of here as I can so my measurements are accurate. And I'm making a soap that is about probably 7.5% super fat in here, if I've got my measurements right. It bears noting that my formulas are based around volume of caustic soda, not weight, and it takes about twice as much volume as its weight. So you would be measuring about twice the volume for half the weight. So if you measure 500 milliliters, it's about 250 grams. So let's do the rest of this math. Alright, so that means for 850 ml of fat, we're going to be using 154 ml of water and 54.8 ml of soda, or somewhere around that. These values have a little bit of variability in them. Alright, let's get everything measured and prepped. Alright, my space is a little cramped on the desk here at the moment. We've got to do a bit of cleaning up, but I've got my stainless box sorted out. It does have a little hole on the bottom, but I was lucky enough to find some paper towels, so we'll put a bit of that under it. I'm about to measure out the caustic soda and the water, and then we'll get cracking into the soap making. So we're aiming for a little over 50 ml, and tall guy problems, I've got to get down on my knees to do this. I'm not proposing. It's about right. Okay. This is the same jar of caustic soda I've used for all 3 batches of soap, so I've got another 1 litre bottle of that. I think I'm going to be right for a while. Alright, let's get our water measured out. I need about 150 ml of water. I'm going to measure it out off camera out the back here. Two things you need to do here. One, you need a non-reactive or non-metallic mixer. That's going to be a stick here, and add the caustic soda to the water. Crucial, don't do it the other way around. And add it a little bit at a time, because that will create an exothermic reaction. And if you do it the other way around, you're going to have a bad day. In the words of South Park, you're going to pizza when you should have French fried. Don't breathe in the fumes of this. It's part of why I'm on my knees as well, so that I don't have to lean over it. Alright, keep mixing this. Right, that's probably a bit much in one go, but that's going to get chucked straight in the water and rinsed off so that there's no potential for residue. You can see some steam and some fumes coming off here. That's what I'm talking about with the exothermic reaction. Okay, let's get everything prepped while that sits. So we've got our stick blender here. With this volume in the slow cooker, I might not actually be able to use this. The water level might be too low, but we'll see how we go. Alright, so it's D-Day. I've got my disposable mixing stick. Let's go. We mix this in. And we'll give it a bit of a stir first before I get the stick blender into it. Yep, I can definitely smell it now. But pretty quickly it turns a soapy smell. A bit like laundry soap, which is pretty close to what this is. Alright, let's get the stick blender in the job, and hopefully we don't split this everywhere. Oh, it is spitting everywhere, and I've got purple dots on my t-shirt from last time I tried this. This is what they call hot process soap. Alright, it's spraying stuff everywhere. I need to rinse my arms. Definitely the tide's too low. And I'll need to rinse this t-shirt pretty much straight after I finish this. I'm going to just have to rely on the stick for this one. The mixer's not going to help. but this will react quite quickly being a hot process. And at this point I can turn my heat off. There's enough residual heat in the pot to do this job. Although I'm going to turn it back on again just because last time I think this took a little while to cook. This is looking much better soap. Last time it went pretty much immediately to gel phase, and I think that's because I had it way too hot. However, gel phase is not all bad. It makes for good soap, and as I've learned in the previous 2 attempts that I've done this, and I've done a bit of homework, it does change the cosmetic effect. It doesn't look pretty. So yeah, we'll just keep stirring this for a bit, and we'll jump to when it started to cure. Alright, it's been going for a bit. Now it's really starting to thicken up. It's all good, and it's looking more white and soapy this time, as opposed to the last batch that was a bit funny coloured. So it's reacting very nicely at a slightly lower temperature, which is good. I've turned the pot off. Now, I'm not too worried about texture of soap, so I'm going to let this go really past the trace point and get it really thick. Then I'm going to slop it into a mould. At this point though, it's just liquid enough that we can add our scent and our colouring. I'm going to do one at a time this time. Last time this turned bright red because the pH was a bit up the whack. Let's see if we can get green soap this time. No, we're going to get red soap again because it's not a pH stable dye. That's okay. At least it'll look interesting. It'll look sort of wavy. I don't care if this is not through properly. And now we're going to add some peppermint this time. I think that's all we need for colouring. We don't need a lot. And we'll add peppermint this time. Last time I think it was citronella, it was eucalyptus oil I think last time. And of course things are hot in here, so it's evaporating and my eyes are now a bit full of peppermint. But yeah, that's good. Now's probably the time to scoop it into the mould. A little bit more of this, and it's getting solid very quickly, so now we have to work post haste. Alright. Yep. Our soap get a little bit too hot, and we have what's called volcano now. Chemical reaction has continued inside and it's got very hot, and because of the caustic soda naturally, and we're volcanoing up, but it means the inside's gone gel phase. That's not bad. We'll just squash that back down in a minute. It'll still be usable soap, it's just not very cosmetic. Advantages of cleaning up on this is no detergent needed. It all soaps up very nicely, and you probably want to do this before the residual heat in the crock pot dries everything up and it turns into hard rock-like soap. Get into this fairly quickly. Put some hot water in here, not some cold stuff, so you don't crack your crock pot. By the time you're done, you should be well enough clean that you won't taste anything in your food and the wife won't hit you with a giant wooden spoon. I really hope she's not watching me right now. Our soap is still warm to the touch, but it's cooled down enough and started to solidify. I want to get it out of this box before too much else happens and it gets stuck in there permanently. So let's get this out so we can slice it up. Alright, well we're out, so that means it's time to go and find a knife and chop these up into block sizes and then let them sit for a day or two. Alright, so I'm going to leave the video around about here, but these are, acceptable size blocks of soap. They will work. They don't look the prettiest, but it's soap and it smells a little bit like peppermint. It smells a bit like beef at the moment too, but that will calm down over time as it sets. So
You can use this stuff pretty much as soon as it cools down when you're doing a hot process, but you really need to leave it for a couple of days for it to be more soap-like. So that's what we'll do. We'll leave it in a quiet, warm place to cool off for a few days. Anyway, we'll see you later. Hope it's been a handy video.